You can buy a house in regional Australia for less than a decent used car. At first glance, it sounds like a rare opportunity, maybe even a smart financial move. But before jumping in, it's worth asking the real question: why is it so cheap? In many cases, those low prices are not a bargain, they are a warning. They often reflect deeper issues like limited job opportunities, lack of healthcare access, safety concerns, and long-term lifestyle challenges. Some towns have seen massive population decline and never truly recovered, while others may appear stable on paper but carry surprisingly high crime rates. What looks like an affordable entry into property can quickly turn into a difficult place to live, especially for retirees or long-term buyers. Cheap does not always mean value. In the wrong location, the real cost shows up over time in your safety, your well-being, and your future options. Number 10. Broken Hill, New South Wales. You can still buy a house in Broken Hill for under $200,000. You might even get a renovated 3-bedroom with a yard for that price. And then you look at what is actually supporting it. Broken Hill's population peaked at around 30,000 in the early 1960s. By 2026, it is projected to sit at around 16,000. That is not a crash. That is a slow, 60-year bleed that has not stopped. The 14% population decline over just the last 20 years alone was the steepest fall of any Australian city in that period. The median age of residents is 44, the oldest of any significant regional centre in New South Wales. The workforce participation rate is 52.3%, almost 10 points below the state average. Employment has been declining for years as the mining sector employs fewer people despite producing more ore. What nobody tells you is this: Broken Hill did not collapse. It just kept slowly contracting. And here is where that matters for property. Cheap housing in Broken Hill does not mean appreciating value. The fundamentals that drive property prices upward, population growth, job creation, young people arriving, are all running in reverse. There is a sentiment you will find consistently in discussions about the place. Broken Hill is not broken. It is just permanently leaving. That said, and this is important, Broken Hill has a genuine hospital, a real arts community, extraordinary outback landscapes, the living desert sculptures, and a civic identity that residents are genuinely proud of. The town has not given up. There is a livability strategy running through to 2043. Good people are doing good work there. But here is the honest trade. You save on housing, and then you pay in trajectory. Property with no demand behind it is not an investment. It is an address. Broken Hill is 1,100 kilometres from Sydney. That is not a distance. That is a commitment. You do not simply pop back for a specialist appointment or a family birthday. You plan, you fly, you spend money every single time. Summer temperatures regularly reach 45 degrees. The water supply comes via pipeline from the Murray River. Broken Hill has never had its own reliable water source, and that should be a more alarming sentence than most people realize. Broken Hill is not broken, but it is a place where you need to arrive with eyes open, a concrete plan, and absolutely no expectation that cheap housing today becomes valuable housing tomorrow. Number 9. Mount Isa, Queensland. Mount Isa recorded the largest volume of population loss of any local government area in Australia between 2010 and 2020. More people left Mount Isa in that single decade than left any other council area in the country. And yet houses there are cheap, which is exactly how it ends up here. Mount Isa exists because of Mount Isa Mines, one of the most productive single mine sites in world history. The problem is that the mine keeps getting more productive while employing fewer people. Automation does not stop producing ore. It just stops needing you to be there. The town is 900 kilometres from the coast and 900 kilometres from Brisbane. It is genuinely remote in the way that makes every aspect of daily life slightly more expensive and more complicated than anywhere connected to a major supply chain. Groceries cost more. Trades are harder to find. When something breaks, your car, your air conditioner, anything, the weight and the cost are both larger than you expect. What nobody tells you is this: if the mine keeps scaling back its workforce, the town scales back with it. Services leave, shops close, the social fabric thins, and the cheap house you bought is worth less than the day you arrived. The upside, and there is one, is that if you have a high-paying job lined up in mining or health, Mount Isa will pay you well to be there, cost you less to live than the coast, and offer landscapes so genuinely dramatic that people who have lived there come back to visit for decades. But retiring there on a pension with no mining income behind you? The isolation will cost you in ways the cheap house price does not advertise. Number 8. Darwin, Northern Territory. Darwin looks like a deal until you actually live there for a full year. Median house prices around $500,000 to $550,000, cheaper than every other Australian capital city. A tropical harbour. Beautiful evenings for about 5 months of the year. And then the wet season arrives. Darwin's wet season runs from approximately October to April. That is not a bit of rain. That is humidity so extreme it becomes a physical presence in the room. Thunderstorms every afternoon for weeks. Mold that returns the day after you clean it. The constant noise of rain hammering a tin roof at 2 in the morning when you have a hospital appointment at 8. Darwin has a crime index of 63.2 on international safety rankings, the third highest of any Australian city. There was a 17% increase in assault crimes in a recent reporting period. Theft, break-ins, and alcohol-related public disorder are consistent themes in every police report. What nobody tells you is this. Darwin's cheap prices are not a market inefficiency that clever buyers have discovered. They are a reflection of reality priced directly into the market. The population has historically been unstable. The city lost population when a major construction project ended. The pattern of people arriving for work and leaving when the work changes is built into the city's DNA. The humidity is not weather. It is a personality trait that gets into your walls, your wardrobe, your lungs, and your outlook. People who grew up in temperate climates and moved to Darwin describe the first wet season as something that physically changed them. The second wet season is when they started looking at property listings in Adelaide. The honest trade for retirees specifically, Darwin is a young, transient, government and defence city. The stable, community-oriented social environment that retired people genuinely need is harder to find in Darwin than in comparable Australian cities. Healthcare is relatively good. There is a full tertiary hospital, but the climate that feels exotic on a fortnight's holiday becomes something you either make permanent peace with or simply cannot tolerate. Number 7. Townsville, Queensland. Townsville's own local newspaper, the Townsville Bulletin, called the city the state's undisputed crime capital. That is not an outside critic. That is the hometown paper. Drug offences in Townsville increased 162% over a 15-year period. Car theft and home break-ins are consistent community concerns. Safety rankings have placed Townsville as Australia's least safe major centre by composite score. Residents describe the experience of crime as a daily calculation rather than a background assumption. Check the lock. Think twice before leaving valuables in the car. Be deliberate about where you go after dark. And here is where it gets complicated, because Townsville is also genuinely beautiful. The harbour is real. Magnetic Island is 12 minutes by ferry and one of the most underrated places in Queensland. Castle Hill rises in the middle of the city and looks down over the Coral Sea, turning pink at sunset in a way that people photograph every single day for 30 years and never get tired of. The population is around 200,000. This is a real city with real infrastructure. Hospital, university, airport, all the services. House prices of around $370,000 to $400,000 look reasonable by national standards. What nobody tells you is this. The issues driving Townsville's crime, youth unemployment, substance abuse, social disadvantage, limited opportunity for certain demographics, are systemic. They do not respond to a new police station and a press release. They respond to generational policy and economic change. And that change has been promised in Townsville for 30 years. Living here means doing a daily calculation that most Australians in safer cities simply do not have to make. Is that calculation tolerable? Many people living in Townsville would tell you yes, and they would mean it. But it is a calculation you need to go in fully prepared to make. Number 6. Cairns, Queensland. Cairns has something most cities would genuinely do anything to have. The Great Barrier Reef, 30 minutes offshore. The Daintree Rainforest, an hour to the north. The oldest tropical rainforest on Earth. World-class diving and snorkeling. International flights. A natural setting that people travel from 50 countries to experience. And then you look at what that setting actually supports for the people who live there full-time. Cairns recorded 128,000 incidents per 100,000 people in a recent annual crime report, a 15% increase in that period. That figure places it among the highest crime rate cities in the entire country. Property crime, theft, and public disorder are consistently high. Youth crime involving drugs and alcohol is a documented structural challenge. Here is the specific issue for the retirement calculation. Cairns runs on tourism. Tourism is seasonal. Tourism is fragile. When borders close, when cyclones come, when travel patterns shift, Cairns gets it first and hardest. The local employment market outside tourism and government is genuinely thin. What nobody tells you is this. Cairns monetized its geography but never fully diversified its economy. Visitors arrive, experience the reef, spend their money, and leave. The economy stays behind. And then the humidity stays behind too, because in Cairns, the humidity does not leave. Not in January. Not in March. Not ever, really. There are two types of people who live in Cairns long-term. People who genuinely love tropical living so completely that no discomfort cancels it out. These people are real, they exist, and they would not trade their life for anything. And people who arrive for the lifestyle discovered that the humidity is not a seasonal thing but a permanent condition, and spent the next 18 months looking at flights back to Brisbane. Know which category you are before you sign a contract. The humidity in Cairns is not weather. It is an environment. You do not walk outside into it. You arrive inside it. Your glasses fog the moment you leave an air-conditioned building. The mold has a head start on your freshly cleaned walls every single morning. Number 5. Wollongong, New South Wales. Wollongong gets called a gong by people who love it. It sits right on the New South Wales coast beneath the escarpment, an hour south of Sydney. The beaches are real, the surf is real, and the cheaper house prices relative to Sydney look real too. Median around $800,000, which by New South Wales coastal standards genuinely represents value. But Wollongong has lived and died on steel and coal for a century. The Port Kembla Steelworks and the Illawarra coal industry gave the city its identity, its jobs, and its communities. And those industries have been contracting, mechanizing, and threatening closure for decades. Every few years there is a crisis, a package, a promise. The steel hangs on. The coal hangs on. And the city hangs on. What nobody tells you is this. When an industry that defined a city starts declining, it does not just take jobs. It takes the culture, the purpose, and the confidence of the community. Wollongong has adapted. The university is significant. The health sector has grown. The northern suburbs are genuinely lovely. But the employment ceiling for people who are not commuting to Sydney is real and has been real for a long time. Drug offences and associated crime in certain suburbs are documented issues. The beaches near Port Kembla carry serious environmental concerns from decades of industrial activity that community groups have been campaigning about for years. The honest version of Wollongong, for people who work in Sydney, want coastal access without Sydney prices, and are willing to commute, this is a genuine and defensible choice. For retirees specifically, the northern suburbs and the Illawarra corridor are genuinely lovely, and many people retire there very happily. But the industrial southern suburbs and the economic dependence on industries that keep almost dying without quite dying create a tension that is never fully resolved. Number 4. Whyalla, South Australia. Whyalla sits on the Spencer Gulf in South Australia, about 400 kilometres from Adelaide. It is a steel-making city, and its story is one of the most dramatic in modern Australian economic history. In 2016, Arium Steel, the owner of the Whyalla Steelworks and the employer of about 4,000 people in a city of 22,000, went into administration. The steelworks faced closure. The government intervened. GFG Alliance took over. And for years since, Whyalla has existed in a state of slow, agonizing uncertainty about whether the steel industry that built it will actually survive. House prices in Whyalla, median around $150,000 to $180,000. That is not a regional discount. That is a risk premium built into the price. What nobody tells you is this. Cheap houses in Whyalla are priced to reflect genuine uncertainty about the city's future. When your city's largest employer is itself on precarious financial footing, owing significant amounts, facing questions about long-term viability, the house price is telling you something. Listen to it. The residents of Whyalla are not the problem. They are in many cases people who built their lives in a place they love and have been living with serious uncertainty for nearly a decade. That is not their fault, and they have handled it with extraordinary resilience. But buying a house in Whyalla as a retirement investment is buying a house whose value is directly tied to decisions made in boardrooms and government offices you have absolutely no influence over. If the steal survives and investment flows in, great. If it does not, that $160,000 house becomes harder to sell with every passing year. And Whyalla winters on the Spencer Gulf are cold and windy in a way that no tourism brochure ever bothers to mention. Number 3. Tennant Creek, Northern Territory. Tennant Creek sits in the Northern Territory, 500 kilometers north of Alice Springs and 1,000 kilometers south of Darwin. Population around 3,000 people. Median house price around $200,000 to $280,000. Council rates are modest. Cost of living is surprisingly high because of transport costs on everything that needs to be imported. And behind those modest prices are numbers that matter enormously. Tennant Creek has the highest rate of domestic violence per capita of any town in Australia. It has been flagged repeatedly in federal reports, parliamentary inquiries, and community investigations as experiencing a level of social distress that goes well beyond what any policy response has yet been able to adequately address. What nobody tells you is this. Tennant Creek is not on a list of difficult towns because the people there are bad. The complexity of what is happening in communities like Tennant Creek, intergenerational trauma, the ongoing consequences of past interventions, alcohol and substance issues, the collision between traditional culture and a Western economic and legal system, requires far more than a dismissive sentence to understand. What it also requires is honesty. And the honest sentence is this. Tennant Creek is not a retirement destination for anyone. The distance to medical care is not a trade-off. It is a genuine emergency planning issue. The social environment is one that multiple levels of government have been trying to stabilize for decades with inconsistent results. The heat from October to March is extreme. There is a reason the house prices reflect uncertainty and difficulty rather than opportunity. Some towns are cheap because they are undiscovered. Tennant Creek is not undiscovered. It is exactly what the price says it is. Number 2. Rockhampton, Queensland. Here is where we have to be completely honest about something uncomfortable. Rockhampton appears on both sides of the argument simultaneously. It is a genuine regional city with real retirement appeal, and it also appears on every list of Australia's highest crime rate cities. Both things are true at the same time. Rockhampton has a crime index of 67.2 on international safety platforms, making it Australia's most dangerous city by that measure and placing it in concerning company globally. The crime rate of 132 incidents per 1,000 people involves mostly theft, burglary, and assault. And Rockhampton also has a full tertiary hospital, a population of 80,000, an airport, a university campus, house prices of around $345,000, and 48% price growth in a single year. That last figure suggests the market genuinely believes the city has a future. What nobody tells you about Rockhampton is this. The city is not uniformly dangerous. Like every city of its size, it has suburbs that are genuinely fine to live in, and suburbs where the crime statistics are heavily concentrated. The difference between making Rockhampton work well and having a very difficult experience there is almost entirely a function of thorough suburb research. The honest version, the crime statistics are real and not inflated. Youth crime driven by social disadvantage and substance abuse is a structural problem the city has not yet solved. If you move to Rockhampton without doing serious suburb-level research and buy into the wrong postcode, you will experience the problem directly. If you do the research, understand the city's layout, and choose carefully, Rockhampton offers things its crime statistics do not advertise. One of Australia's best regional hospitals, genuine city infrastructure, the Capricorn Coast a comfortable drive away, and prices that reflect a regional Queensland city rather than a coastal tourist trap. But go in with clear eyes. The price is partly reflecting the daily calculation you will need to make. Number 1. Alice Springs, Northern Territory. Alice Springs topping this list is not a controversial choice. The data makes it for us. For the year ending November 2025, Alice Springs recorded 37,955 offences per 100,000 residents. That number is not a typo. International Crime Index rankings place Alice Springs 34th most dangerous globally, sitting alongside cities in countries with entirely different safety infrastructure to Australia. The assault rate is several times the national average. Youth violence increased 50% in a recent reporting period. Home break-ins, car theft, and public disorder are consistent daily realities for residents, not occasional incidents. and houses in Alice Springs are relatively cheap. That is not a coincidence. Here is what the data cannot fully capture, and what makes Alice Springs one of the most genuinely complex places in the country. The crime in Alice Springs is not random urban violence. It is the surface expression of something that goes much, much deeper. Decades of policy failures towards First Nations communities. The consequences of the 2007 intervention and everything that followed. Intergenerational trauma. The movement of people from remote communities into a town that lacks the infrastructure and services to support them. Alcohol. Poverty. Children who are on the street at night because, as Alice Springs' own mayor has stated publicly, it is sometimes safer than being at home. What nobody tells you about Alice Springs is this. Serious, thoughtful people, journalists, academics, community leaders, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, have been working on this problem for 40 years. The Assistant Commissioner of the Northern Territory Police has been on record saying that you cannot arrest your way out of this. That is the police saying, clearly and publicly, we cannot police our way out of this situation. Let that sink in. It is not a governance failure for lack of trying. It is a governance failure for lack of doing the deep, long-term, genuinely difficult work the situation actually requires. For anyone watching this who is thinking about retirement and spotted a cheap house in Alice Springs, the honest answer is no. Not for retirement. Not without a specific job, a specific plan, and a completely clear-eyed understanding of what daily life in Alice Springs actually involves right now. The landscape around Alice Springs is extraordinary. Uluru is not far. The McDonnell Ranges are genuinely one of the most beautiful landscapes in Australia. The town has a hospital, shops, and community. But Alice Springs in 2026 is ranked alongside some of the most dangerous places on Earth in per capita crime terms. And the cheap house price is the property market's honest assessment of that reality. It is not the market being pessimistic. It is the market being accurate. And that is 10 Australian towns that look like bargains, until you understand what the price is actually telling you. None of this is about the people who live in these places. Every single town on this list is people who love it, who have built their lives there, who know something about it that crime statistics and population charts will never fully capture. That is true, and it does not change the data. The honest framework for evaluating cheap regional Australian property is simple. Do not ask, is it cheap? You can see that on the listing. Ask why it is cheap. If the answer is it is undiscovered and undervalued, great. Do more research and find out whether that is actually true. If the answer is the mine is struggling, that is a risk you need to price in. If the answer is people are leaving, find out why and whether those reasons apply to you. And if the answer is the crime statistics are genuinely serious and have been serious for a long time, that is information the house price has already factored in. The market is telling you something. Listen to it. Cheap housing in Australia has not disappeared. But in some towns, cheap is a warning rather than an opportunity. Knowing the difference, that is the most valuable research you can do before making one of the biggest decisions of your life. Do your own research. Visit in person. And never make a major decision about where to live based on a single source of information, including this one.